and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting over episode 21 of Neon Genesis Evangelion. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. So, interestingly enough, in breaking with the tradition of the previous episodes, we're starting off with a flashback rather than the opening sequence. And this appears to be something that led up to the second impact and the disaster it brought with it. Additionally, it seems like one of the powers that be, possibly Seely, are pontificating on the significance of this footage. So interestingly, it seems like this recording of whatever they're doing, it's going wrong. And given the time period this flashback is set in, it very well might be the second impact itself. So we get a very, very brief glimpse of what was presumably Adam during the second impact, and then the feed cuts out saying it's all top secret and all that. So it seems like we're back to the present. Kaji was going to try and call Misato, but for whatever reason, she didn't pick up the phone. And Kaji declares that he's going to embark on his last mission. Meanwhile, back with Misato, Futsuki has been abducted. And it seems like a bunch of spooks are sort of quasi-interrogating Misato about it. They think that Kaji's behind all this. So now we cut to Futsuki, and he has, in fact, been abducted by Seely. And Seely's doing this thing where they hide behind these monoliths and broadcast only the sound of their voices to make themselves seem extra ominous. So now we cut back to 1999, before the second impact, back when Fuyutsuki was, I guess, a college professor. So, Fuyutsuki is, I guess, sort of getting a little bit of a lecture here on how little stock he puts in human relationships. He's sort of a shut-in as a professor. And that's sort of like a running theme throughout all of Evangelion. The ability to interact with other people meaningfully. So this is where the plot gets intriguing, because Fuyutsuki is talking to none other than Yui Ikari, Shinji's mother, back in life. So, curiously enough, Yui was a brilliant scientist, but she had ambitions of being a mother rather than fully pursuing her career. So back to the present day, Sealy is sort of narking at Fuyutsuki about that whole Unit 1 absorbing the S2 organ, just because that creates, as they call it, a supreme being. So back in the past, what we have here is Fuyutsuki and a younger Gendo meeting for the first time. So interestingly enough, Gendo is sort of like a punk here. Fuyutsuki was bailing him out of prison. So Fuyutsuki here, like, just about crapped his pants when Yui tells him that she's been dating Gendo. Fuyutsuki very clearly holds a low opinion of Gendo, and that somebody is scientifically brilliant, and I just generally kind-hearted as Yui would go for a guy like that, but I mean, opposites attract. Fuyutsuki seems to be of the opinion that the only reason Gendo's bothering with Yui is because she has access to government funding and things like that. So in the post-Second Impact world, it seems like Fuyutsuki is acting as a medical doctor. It's not clear what sort of professor he was before, but I guess he's leveraging whatever his skills as necessary in the post-apocalyptic world. So as fate would have it, Gendo and Fuyutsuki are I guess, reacquainted in the ruins of what used to be Antarctica. So we get a little plot point here that, I guess in defiance of tradition, Gendo took Yui's last name after they got married. That's interesting. You know, that's not something that usually happens, at least not in any culture I'm aware of. So curiously enough, Gendo and Futsuki seem to be at odds here in regards with how to proceed with Seele and funding and things like that. Futsuki, at least, seems to have some sort of moral fiber. So now we get a little bit of insight into Misato. She was there at the second impact, and she was the only survivor of the expedition that was actually there. And apparently, she wasn't doing too well mentally. Of course, that's not surprising given all that happened. But she's sort of being held in like a Sealy psych ward or something. So Futsuki knows that whole meteorite story that caused the second impact, that was a fabrication, and now he's sort of revealing that it was Sealy behind that. For one reason or another, they have a vested interest in covering things up. I guess they don't want people to know that it was there screwing around that wrecked the planet. Fair enough, I suppose. More than that, Futsuki's laying into Gendo for his involvement. And I think rightly so. So initially, or at least at this point in time, Futsuki wants to sort of be a whistleblower here, go public on everything about the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the Giant of Light, Adam, and the Second Impact, and Gendo's involvement with Seele and all that. Of course, he's sort of changing his tune when Gendo shows him what becomes the Geofront. It turns out that Nerve didn't make it. It was pre-existing. So Dr. Akagi, Ritsuko's mother, is working there as well. And she sort of reveals that what she's doing is attempting to create a perfect biocomputer. Additionally, they also show him a prototype Evangelion. In this case, they're showing off Unit 0. At this point, it's little more than a head, a spine, and arms. So now we're sort of learning a little bit more about Ritsuko, especially in regards to her friendship with Misato. It was sort of like a weird happenstance because people tended to want to have nothing to do with Ritsuko given her name and her mother's fame, I suppose, but Misato doesn't seem to care about that. So we're learning, I guess, a little bit more about the pathology of Ritsuko and how, I guess, she never had any father figures in her life, and her mother wasn't an especially good mother. So Gendo and Yui are talking here, and as it turns out, according to the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is sort of the blueprint for everything here, a third impact is inevitable. I'll take that back. It's Fuyutsuki and Yui. So, the inevitability of the third impact is something that Nerve and Sealy supposedly want to avert. So in 2004, we have, I guess, the first test of Unit 1. So Gendo, Fuyutsuki, and Dr. Akagi are all present, as is Shinji. So Yui insisted on having Shinji present to, I guess, show off how good everything can be when the test works. You know, sometimes foreshadowing is subtle. So it seems like it was only after whatever happened to Yui that Gendo went all in on the Human Instrumentality Project. So at this point, I think it's fairly clear that Gendo's involvement in human instrumentality has a significant ulterior motive that diverts from whatever Seely wants to do. So now we have something really interesting going on here. Dr. Akagi was romantically involved with Gendo, and Ritsuko sort of witnessed that. We also have a very young Rei that Gendo is looking after. So, Gendo claims that Rei is the child of an acquaintance, but Dr. Akagi sort of sees through that and realizes that something isn't quite right here. So I guess Dr. Akagi's crown achievement was building and developing the Magi computers. And at this point in time, they've only just been built but haven't been activated yet. So now's a very interesting interaction between Rei and Dr. Akagi. Rei is, I guess, rather rude. She calls Dr. Akagi an old hag. Rei lets slip that Gendo's the one who calls Dr. Akagi an old hag. And given that Dr. Akagi already sort of suspected she was related to Yui or something, she finally just snaps and strangles Rei with her bare hands. Of course, she then realizes that she literally just murdered a child and decides the best way is to jump off a ledge. It's really rather morbid, especially because she ended up, I guess, bashing off of one of the computers. And if I remember the layout of the three Magi correctly, that was the one that represents her as a woman. So it's one last cruel twist of irony. So meanwhile, back in the present time, Kaji is going to rescue Futsuki. It seems like at this point that he's essentially double-crossing literally everyone, so he's going to have a pretty big target painted on his back in short order. Futsuki even tells him that, this is probably going to get you killed. Ultimately, he does die, but he appears to be expecting his would-be killer. So having arrived home, she realizes that she's got a message. And it seems like she already knows what the message is probably going to say before she presses the button. So it seems like Kaji already knew that he was probably a dead man by the time he left that message. So notably, Shinji is aware of what's going on, but rather than do anything, he just sort of retreats into his room. So I guess as much as he is growing and developing, he hasn't really done that much. At least not permanently. Alright, that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one.